The classroom buzzed with quiet conversation as students filed in and took their seats across the wide auditorium-style room. Holographic displays flickering to life above each desk while Professor Vekthar arranged his teaching materials at the front podium. His forearms moving in practice coordination, the professor was an impressive sight even among the diverse student body. An insectoid species from the Krell system with chitinous plates that gleamed under the artificial lighting and compound eyes that could observe the entire classroom at once without turning his head. Settle down, everyone. His voice clicked and hummed through the universal translator that hung from the ceiling. Today, we continue our study of Deathworld fauna, specifically the apex predators that have evolved on high gravity. Hostile planets. Lauren Mitchell sat in the back row as usual, her notebook open and stylus ready, watching her alien classmates with quiet interest as they pulled up their own displays and prepared to take notes on the day's lesson. She was one of only 2 humans at the Galactic Academy, part of Earth's first exchange student program after making contact with the greater galactic community just 3 years earlier. And she had learned quickly that staying quiet and observing was often the best strategy in an environment where everyone else had centuries or even millennia of spacefaring history. Let us begin with the apex predators of Vex Prime, Professor Vekthar announced, and the main holographic display shimmered into existence above the classroom floor, showing a massive creature that stood nearly 12 feet tall, with 6 powerful legs and a mouth full of serrated teeth that could bite through metal. Class leaned forward with interest as the professor described the creature's hunting patterns, pack coordination, and the environmental pressures that had shaped it into such an efficient killer over millions of years of evolution. Zix, a reptilian student from the Soros cluster, raised one clawed hand and asked, "Professor, how does this compare to the predators from Tarkus that we studied last week?" "An excellent question," Vekthar replied, pulling up a comparison chart. "The Tarkus armored behemoths are solitary hunters, while the Vex Prime Pack hunters work in coordinated groups of up to 20 individuals, making them far more dangerous despite their smaller individual size." The lesson continued for another hour, covering various death worlds and their dominant predators, each one more terrifying than the last, creatures with venomous spines that could paralyze prey from 50 meters away, ambush predators that could change color to match any environment, and flying hunters with wingspans that blocked out the sun. Lauren took notes diligently, finding the subject fascinating even though she noticed that many of these so-called apex predators would struggle to survive on Earth where the gravity was higher and the environmental conditions were far more variable and extreme. "Now then," Professor Vekthar said, checking his display, "we have time for one more example before the session ends. Does anyone have a preference for which death world we should examine?" Zix raised his hand again, his forked tongue flicking out in what Lauren had learned was a gesture of curiosity among his species. "Professor, could we look at Earth? I know it's a newly contacted world, and I'm curious what kind of apex predator evolved there." Several students turned to glance at Lauren, who kept her expression neutral and continued taking notes while her professor's antennae twitched in what might have been surprise or amusement. "Earth. Yes, of course," Vekthar said, pulling up the planetary database. "A fascinating death world with extremely high gravity, wildly variable climate zones, and an oxygen-rich atmosphere that would be toxic to many species. Let me access their biological records." The holographic display shifted to show Earth rotating slowly in space, its blue oceans and green landmasses clearly visible under swirling white clouds that indicated active weather systems. The humans have been very thorough in cataloging their planet species, the professor noted. Scrolling through the database, they have extensive records of their fauna, including detailed information about predator-prey relationships and ecological hierarchies. He pulled up a list labeled Apex Predators of Earth, and the class leaned forward to see what kind of terrifying creature dominated such a hostile planet. The first entry showed a massive shark with rows of razor-sharp teeth, labeled Great White Shark, Oceanic Apex Predator, and several students made appreciative sounds at the creature's sleek design and obvious power. Impressive, Zix commented. Though not as large as the Vex Prime Hunters. The professor scrolled down, showing more entries: saltwater crocodiles with crushing bite force, polar bears that could survive in frozen wastelands, African lions that hunted in coordinated prides, and various other predators that each dominated their specific environment. These are all formidable in their own right, Vecthar explained. But notice how Earth has multiple apex predators in different ecological niches. This is unusual and speaks to the planet's extreme environmental diversity. A student from the methane-breathing quick species asked through her translator, what ranks at the very top of Earth's apex predator list? Which creature dominates all the others? Professor Vecthar's antennae twitched again as he scrolled to the top of the database, and the holographic display changed to show a new entry. The image that appeared was not a massive beast with claws and fangs. It was a bipedal figure, relatively small and unarmored, with no natural weapons visible on its body. The label read, Homo sapiens, human, planetary apex predator. The classroom fell completely silent for 3 full heartbeats. Then every head in the room slowly turned to look at the back row, where Lauren sat calmly with her stylus still hovering over her notebook, her expression unchanged as 30 pairs of alien eyes focused on her with varying degrees of confusion and disbelief. Six's jaw dropped open, his forked tongue hanging loose in shock. That cannot be correct. The database must have an error. But Professor Vecthar was examining the entry with all 4 hands moving across his display, checking and rechecking the information. No, I am afraid the classification is accurate. Humans rank themselves as the apex predator of their entire planet. Another student, a floating gas bag creature named Prill, pulsed with colors that indicated skepticism. But they have no claws, no armor plating, no venom sacs. How could such a fragile-looking species be apex anything? Lauren finally looked up from her notes and met the stares of her classmates, her face calm and open, not defensive or aggressive, just quietly watching as they processed this unexpected information. Professor Vecthar cleared his throat with a clicking sound. Class, let us remember that apex predator status is not always about size or obvious weapons. Sometimes it is about other factors: intelligence, adaptability, tool use, and hunting strategies. But the damage was done. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence, and Lauren could see the wheels turning in her classmates' minds as they looked at her with new eyes. No longer seeing a fellow student, but something else entirely. Something that had been hiding in plain sight among them this whole time. The session bell chimed, signaling the end of class, and students began gathering their materials in unusual silence. Still casting glances toward Lauren as they filed out of the room, she packed her own things slowly, giving them time to clear out, while Professor Vecthar stood at his podium watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read on his alien features as she walked toward the exit. She heard whispers starting in the hallway outside. The word was already spreading through the station about what the class had discovered, and Lauren knew that everything was about to change. The next day's xenobiology class had a different atmosphere entirely. Students filed in quietly and chose seats that were noticeably farther from Lauren than usual, creating a subtle but obvious buffer zone around the human student who sat in her regular spot with the same calm expression as always. Professor, Vecthar noticed the changed dynamic immediately, his compound eyes tracking the spatial arrangement of his students with what might have been concern. I see yesterday's revelation has created some unease. This is understandable, but let me address it directly, rather than allowing fear to grow from ignorance. He pulled up the Earth database again, and the holographic display showed the same image of a human that had shocked the class the previous day. Let us examine exactly what makes humans the apex predator of their world. Because I assure you, the classification is not an error or a case of species pride. Zix raised his hand hesitantly, his earlier enthusiasm replaced by wariness. Professor, with respect, how can a species with no natural weapons possibly dominate creatures like those sharks and bears we saw? It makes no logical sense. An excellent question that deserves a thorough answer, Vecthar replied, pulling up a new set of data. Human apex status comes not from raw physical power, but from a combination of traits that, when working together, make them extraordinarily effective hunters. The holographic display shifted to show a video recording from Earth ancient humans, moving across a vast savanna under a blazing sun, tracking a large four-legged animal that moved in desperate bounds ahead of them. This is persistence hunting, the professor explained. Watch carefully. The class watched in growing discomfort as the humans followed their prey at a steady jog. Not fast enough to catch it immediately, but fast enough to prevent the animal from resting. Hour after hour under the merciless heat, while the prey animal's movements became increasingly sluggish. The prey is faster in short bursts, Vecthar narrated. But humans have something most predators lack. They can run for hours, even days, without stopping. Their cooling system allows them to regulate body temperature through sweating, while most animals must stop to pant and cool down. A student named Kix, who breathed methane and lived in cold environments, pulsed with disturbed colors. They just keep coming? The prey cannot escape by outlasting them? No, the professor said simply. Humans evolved as endurance hunters on a planet where the heat and gravity would kill most species in minutes. They can track prey across dozens of kilometers until the animal literally collapses from exhaustion. The video showed the final moments, the exhausted animal stumbling and falling while the humans, still moving steadily, closed in with primitive spears. The classroom was completely silent now. A different kind of silence than yesterday's shock. This was the silence of prey animals realizing they were sharing space with a predator. Professor Vecthar continued, seemingly unaware of or perhaps deliberately ignoring the growing tension. But persistence hunting is only one advantage. Let me show you humans in different Earth environments. The display changed to show humans climbing a mountain through thin atmosphere and sub-zero temperatures. Then shifted to show humans swimming in Arctic waters that should have killed them from thermal shock. Then again to show humans crossing deserts, where the surface temperature exceeded the boiling point of water. Humans can survive in every climate zone on their planet. Vecthar explained. From frozen poles to scorching deserts, from sea level to high mountains. They have spread across their entire world and dominated every environment they entered. Prill floated nervously, his gas sacs contracting. But surely their technology. This footage is from before they developed advanced technology, the professor interrupted. These adaptations are biological, not technological. Humans can survive conditions that would kill most galactic species, even without tools. He pulled up another series of images showing human tool evolution, crude stone implements that gradually became more sophisticated over thousands of years. Then metal tools, then complex machines, then weapons that could kill from kilometers away. Tool use and knowledge transmission, Vecthar continued. Humans share information across generations, constantly improving and building on what came before. They went from stone tools to spacefaring vessels in roughly 10,000 years. A brave student asked, what about their physical weaknesses? They have thin skin, no armor, no claws. Surely any predator could easily kill them in direct combat? Could and did, the professor acknowledged. Humans were prey animals for much of their evolution, hunted by creatures far stronger than themselves. This seemed to relax the class slightly until Vecthar continued. But here's the crucial point: humans were prey, past tense. They are no longer hunted by anything on their planet because they systematically eliminated or domesticated every predator that threatened them. The holographic display showed images of humans with various earth predators: bears, big cats, wolves, crocodiles. But these predators were either dead or living peacefully alongside humans in controlled environments. The creatures that once hunted humans are now either extinct, endangered, or living in reservations that humans created and manage, Vecthar explained, his antennae twitching with what might have been unease. Humans became so effective at hunting their hunters that they had to create special protected zones to prevent themselves from wiping out every large predator on their planet. Zix's tail twitched nervously. They hunted their own predators to near extinction? How is that possible? Pack coordination, the professor said, pulling up footage of humans working together. Humans form complex social groups that can number in the millions. They communicate with sophisticated language, plan coordinated attacks, and support injured or weak members until they recover. The display showed human settlements, armies moving in formation, rescue operations, and medical facilities. When one human is threatened, others come to help. When one human learns something useful, all humans in the group benefit. They are not individual predators. They are a collective hunting intelligence. Lauren had remained silent throughout the lesson, taking notes as usual, but now Professor Vecthar turned to address her directly. Miss Mitchell, perhaps you could clarify some facts for the class, since humans understand their own nature better than any database entry. Every eye turned to Lauren again, and she slowly put down her stylus, considering her words carefully before speaking in a calm, measured tone. What would you like to know? The persistence hunting, Zix asked before the professor could respond. Is it true that humans can run for hours without stopping? Yes, Lauren replied simply. Human marathon runners regularly cover 42 kilometers without pause, and ultramarathon runners can go much farther. The current human record is over 1,000 kilometers. The class made various sounds of disbelief and distress while Lauren continued. Humans evolved to chase prey until it died from exhaustion. Our bodies are designed for endurance rather than speed, propulsed with anxious colors. And the environmental tolerance? Can humans really survive in all those extreme conditions we saw? With minimal equipment, yes, Lauren confirmed. Humans live permanently in deserts, Arctic regions, high mountains, tropical jungles, and everywhere in between. We adapt to local conditions within a few generations. A student asked, what about injury recovery? The professor mentioned humans supporting their wounded. Lauren nodded. Humans heal relatively quickly from injuries that would be fatal to many species. We have rapid blood clotting, strong immune systems, and high pain tolerance. Humans have survived losing limbs, massive blood loss, and severe trauma that should have killed them. The classroom had gone very quiet again. Students exchanging glances that ranged from frightened to fascinated, clearly reassessing the small, soft-looking creature that sat among them. Professor Vecthar cleared his throat with a clicking sound. Thank you, Miss Mitchell. I think the class now has a better understanding of human capabilities. As students gathered their materials at the professor's end of the session, Lauren noticed they gave her even more space than before, and several quickened their pace when passing near her seat. She packed her things slowly, aware that the whispers spreading through the station were no longer just curiosity, they were warnings. And she wondered how long it would be before someone decided that having apex predators as exchange students was too dangerous to allow. 3 days after the classroom revelation, Lauren sat in the station cafeteria picking at her meal while monitoring the room with peripheral vision, a habit she had developed since most students now avoided her table, as if she carried a contagious disease. Brandon Cole, the only other human at the academy, dropped his tray onto the table across from her with more force than necessary, his frustration evident in every movement. "This is getting ridiculous. I just had 3 students literally run away when I tried to join their study group." Lauren looked up at her fellow exchange student and offered a small smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "They're scared, Brandon. We need to give them time to adjust." "Scared?" Brandon's voice rose slightly before he caught himself and lowered it again. "We haven't done anything threatening. We've been model students for 6 months. And suddenly everyone treats us like we're about to eat them, because they just learned we're apex predators from a death world," Lauren said calmly, taking a sip of water. "Most of these students come from peaceful worlds where the biggest predator is the size of a house cat. The idea that we evolved hunting and killing terrifies them." Brandon stabbed at his food with unnecessary aggression. "So what? We just accept being treated like monsters? We came here to build bridges, to prove Earth deserves a place in the galactic community. And we will," Lauren replied, her voice steady and soothing in contrast to his agitation. "But first they need to understand that being capable of violence is not the same as being violent." Humans chose to come in peace. Before Brandon could respond, 3 large figures approached their table. Dreth students, members of a warrior species known throughout the galaxy for their honor-based culture and combat prowess, each standing nearly 7 feet tall with dense muscle and natural bone plating across their shoulders and forearms. The lead Dreth, whose name badge identified him as Krath, stopped beside their table and looked down at the 2 humans with an expression that might have been contempt. "So these are the fearsome apex predators everyone whispers about. They look even smaller up close." Lauren set down her fork carefully and met Krath's eyes without challenge or submission, simply observing him the way she might observe any new phenomenon. "Can we help you with something?" "We heard the rumors about humans," Krath continued, ignoring her question. "Stories about how dangerous you are. How you hunted your own predators to extinction. How you can survive anything but looking at you. I find these stories difficult to believe." Brandon started to stand, but Lauren placed a hand on his arm, a gentle touch that nonetheless stopped him immediately. "The stories are accurate," she said to Krath in the same calm tone. "But we're not here to prove anything. We're here to study and learn like everyone else." Krath laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Not here to prove anything? Then you are not true apex predators. On my world, strength must be demonstrated. Weakness must be challenged. That's not how humans operate," Brandon said, his jaw tight with controlled anger. "We don't need to prove ourselves to anyone." "Then you are prey, pretending to be predators," another Dreth said, moving closer to their table in what was clearly meant as intimidation. "All this fear over nothing. The humans are soft." Lauren's hand was still on Brandon's arm, and she could feel his muscles tensing for action, could sense his body preparing to defend their honor the way Dreth culture demanded. But she knew that would only make everything worse. "Please step back," she said to the Dreth, her voice still calm but with an underlying firmness. "We don't want any trouble." "Of course you don't," Krath sneered, reaching out to grab Lauren's shoulder. "Because you are weak." His hand never completed the movement because Lauren was suddenly not where she had been a moment before, having slid sideways out of her seat with a fluid motion that put the table between herself and the Dreth, while her other hand pulled Brandon back and away from potential danger. Cafeteria had gone completely silent, every student watching the confrontation with varying degrees of alarm. And somewhere in the background an automated alert was already summoning station security. Krath stared at the empty space where Lauren had been, surprised by speed he had not expected from someone so small, fast. But running away only proves my point. I'm not running, Lauren said. And Brandon noticed something in her voice that he had never heard before, not anger or fear, but a kind of cold assessment, as if she were calculating variables in a complex equation. I'm choosing not to engage. You have no choice, Krath growled, moving around the table toward her. On my world. When challenged, you must fight or be marked as coward. We're not on your world, Lauren replied, shifting position again to maintain distance. And Brandon realized with a chill that she was not moving randomly. She was positioning herself between the Dreth and the exit, controlling the geometry of the confrontation, even while appearing to retreat. Station Security Officer Crix arrived then, pushing through the crowd of onlookers with his weapon drawn but pointed at the floor. Everyone stand down immediately, Krath. Back away from the human students now. The Dreth hesitated, clearly unwilling to back down from what his culture considered a legitimate challenge. But Crix was known as one of the few security officers who had actually seen combat, and his 6 eyes were tracking everyone in the vicinity with professional alertness. This is not your concern, Crix, Krath said. We are simply testing the humans' claims of strength. By cornering 2 students in a cafeteria? Crix's mandibles clicked with disapproval. That's not testing. That's intimidation. And it stops now. The Dreth looked between Crix, Lauren, and Brandon, clearly calculating whether to push the issue, then finally stepped back with obvious reluctance. Fine. But everyone should know the truth. These humans are all reputation and no substance. Lauren said nothing, did not rise to the bait, simply stood perfectly still while her eyes tracked the 3 Dreth as they left the cafeteria. And Brandon noticed that she did not relax even after they were gone. Crix holstered his weapon and approached Lauren carefully. Are you injured? No, she replied, her voice returning to its normal calm tone. Thank you for responding so quickly. The security officer's eyes studied her with an intensity that made Brandon uncomfortable. How close did that come to violence, Miss Mitchell? And I want an honest answer. Lauren was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her words sent a chill through every student still listening. I counted 3 opponents, identified 2 exits, calculated 14 different ways to neutralize the immediate threat, and estimated I could have disabled all 3 of them in under 6 seconds if they had actually attacked. The cafeteria went even quieter. If that was possible, and Brandon stared at his fellow human with new understanding. She had been tracking everything, calculating probabilities, playing responses, all while appearing completely calm. But you chose not to, Crix observed. And something in his voice suggested this was a test. Of course, I chose not to, Lauren said. And now there was a hint of weariness in her tone. They were scared students acting tough, not real threats. Humans can choose restraint, even when we're calculating violence. Crix was silent for several heartbeats, his multiple eyes studying Lauren with what might have been respect or might have been concern. That is perhaps the most disturbing thing I've heard today. The fact that you were planning combat scenarios while looking perfectly peaceful. It's not planning, Lauren corrected quietly. It's instinct. Humans assess threats constantly. We can't turn it off. We can only choose what we do with the information. Brandon found his voice. Are you saying you're always doing this? Always calculating who you could beat and how? Every human does it, Lauren said, finally sitting back down at the table. We just don't talk about it because it sounds threatening, but yes. Walk into any room with a human, and part of their mind is automatically tracking exits, identifying potential weapons, assessing who poses danger. It's how we survived as a species. Crix made a note on his datapad. I need to file a report about this incident. I will note that the humans showed restraint and the Dreth were the instigators. Thank you, Lauren said. Then added, for what it's worth, I understand why everyone is frightened. Humans are frightening when you understand what we're capable of. But we came here to be students and friends, not predators." The security officer left without responding. And Lauren looked around the cafeteria at the dozens of students who were still staring at her with expressions ranging from fear to fascination. Brandon leaned across the table and whispered, "Were you really calculating all that? The 14 ways to disable them?" 16, actually, Lauren admitted quietly. "I thought of 2 more while talking to Crix. And yes, I was calculating it the entire time. I couldn't stop if I wanted to." Brandon sat back in his chair, seeing his fellow human with new eyes. Understanding now why the aliens were so frightened. It was not what humans did, but what they were capable of doing. And the fact that they were aware of it every single moment. Lauren picked up her fork and resumed eating. But Brandon noticed her eyes never stopped moving, tracking every student who entered or left the cafeteria, monitoring potential threats that she would never act on but could never stop assessing. The administration conference room was designed for comfort and diplomacy, with adaptive seating that adjusted to accommodate dozens of different species' physiologies. But the 3 officials gathered there seemed anything but comfortable as they reviewed the security footage from the cafeteria incident. Dean Morok, a massive turtle-like being whose species had never known predation in their entire evolutionary history, watched the recording with growing unease. "Play that part again." Where the human moves, Security Officer Crix tapped his datapad, and the holographic display showed Lauren's movement in slow motion, one moment sitting calmly, the next already in motion, sliding out of her seat and repositioning with a fluidity that suggested the action had been planned long before it was executed. She knew what she was going to do before the breath even reached for her. Professor Vekthar observed, his antennae twitching with scientific interest. "Watch her eyes." She was tracking his hand position, calculating the intercept point, planning her response, while appearing completely calm. Dean Morok added, his voice heavy with concern. "That level of threat assessment happening beneath a peaceful exterior is deeply troubling. How can we trust beings who are constantly calculating violence, even when they smile?" Dr. Helix, the station's xenopsychologist and a member of an empathic species that could sense emotional states, spoke carefully. "With respect, Dean, that is the entire point. Humans can calculate violence while choosing peace. That is not deception. It is control, or it is a predator waiting for the right moment to strike," Morok countered, his shell plates shifting nervously. "We have allowed 2 apex predators into our academy, surrounded by students from prey species worlds. And we are only now understanding the danger." Crix made a clicking sound of disagreement. "If I may offer a security perspective, Dean, the human showed remarkable restraint in that situation. She was clearly capable of harming those Dreth, but chose not to. That suggests strong ethical controls on her predator instincts, or clever strategy," Morok argued. "Perhaps she knew that attacking would result in expulsion, so she calculated that restraint was more advantageous." Professor Vekthar pulled up his database. "I've been researching human psychology and evolution since our classroom discussion. I believe we are looking at this incorrectly. Humans are not hiding their predator nature. They are managing it." "Explain," Dr. Helix said, leaning forward with interest. "Humans evolved in an environment of constant threat," Vekthar began, pulling up images of Earth's hostile ecosystems, predators, diseases, environmental hazards, and competition with other human groups. Their survival required constant vigilance and rapid threat assessment. He showed footage of early human settlements with defensive walls, organized watch rotations, and coordinated defensive responses. But humans also had to cooperate in large groups to survive, which meant controlling aggressive impulses toward group members while maintaining readiness for external threats. A contradiction, Morak said. How can they be both cooperative and constantly ready for violence? Not a contradiction, a balance, Dr. Helix interjected. Humans develop strong pack bonding and empathy alongside their predator instincts. They can feel compassion while calculating threat responses. The two systems operate simultaneously. D. Morak was not convinced. This still does not address the fundamental question of safety. We have a responsibility to protect all students. And if humans are constantly assessing everyone around them as potential threats, perhaps we should ask the human directly, Crick suggested. Miss Mitchell has been cooperative and honest in every interaction. I recommend we interview her formally and get answers to these questions. The dean considered this, then nodded slowly. Very well, bring her in. But I want all security protocols active during the interview. 20 minutes later, Lauren entered the conference room and immediately took in every detail. The position of each official, the security cameras in corners, the distance to exits, the fact that Crick's hand rested near his weapon, and she forced herself to stop the automatic threat assessment because she knew they were probably monitoring her. Reactions. Please. Sit. Dean Morak gestured to a human-style chair that had been provided. We appreciate you coming on such short notice. Of course, Lauren said. Settling into the chair with deliberate calm. How can I help you? Dr. Helix spoke first. Her empathic senses focused intently on the human. Miss Mitchell, we are trying to understand human psychology better, particularly how your predator instincts interact with your social behaviors. Can you explain how humans manage this balance? Lauren took a moment to organize her thoughts. Humans form very strong emotional bonds with people we consider part of our pack friends. Family, teammates, those bonds create genuine care and protectiveness. We will sacrifice ourselves for pack members without hesitation. But you also assess them as threats? Crix asked. We assess everyone, Lauren admitted. It is not personal or hostile. It is just how human brains work. We evolved in an environment where failure to notice danger meant death. So our minds automatically track potential threats even when we are completely safe and happy. Professor Vekthar leaned forward. Can you give us an example of how this works in practice? Lauren gestured around the room. Right now, part of my mind has already noted that Dean Morak is too large for me to physically overpower. That Crix is armed and trained. That Professor Vekthar has 4 arms, which gives him advantages in close combat. That Dr. Helix is physically fragile, but her empathic abilities make her dangerous in a different way. The room went very quiet, and Lauren continued, but simultaneously, another part of my mind recognizes you as authority figures who mean me no harm, as educators who are trying to understand me, as people worthy of respect and cooperation. Both assessments are happening at the same time. Which assessment wins? Dr. Helix asked softly. If there were a conflict between these two mental processes? The social one, almost always, Lauren said without hesitation. Humans are not slaves to their predator instincts. We chose to be social, cooperative beings because that is what kept us alive. A human alone is vulnerable, but humans working together are unstoppable. Dean Morak shifted in his seat. You say almost always. When would the predator instinct override social cooperation? Lauren met his eyes steadily. When someone threatens our pack, humans can disconnect their empathy when necessary to protect people they love. That is when we become truly dangerous, not when we are threatened personally, but when someone we care about is in danger. Because you are pack animals, Vekthar said. More statement than question. Because we are family animals, Lauren corrected. Humans do not just work together for survival. We genuinely love and care for our pack members. That love makes us better and kinder. But it also makes us absolutely ruthless toward anything that threatens our loved ones. Crix asked the question everyone was thinking. How many beings in this room could you neutralize if you wanted to? Lauren's expression showed discomfort for the first time. Do you really want me to answer that? Please, Dr. Helix said gently. We need honesty to build trust. All of you, Lauren said quietly. Within seconds, before security could respond, I have already calculated how to do it, and I cannot stop myself from knowing that information. The officials exchanged glances while Lauren continued. But I would never want to. That is the crucial point you need to understand. Humans know what they are capable of and choose not to do it. We have had weapons that could destroy our entire planet for generations. And we chose not to use them because of empathy? Dr. Helix asked. Because of imagination, Lauren replied. Humans can imagine the consequences of violence. We can picture the pain and suffering we would cause. We can understand the long-term costs of short-term aggression. That imagination is what separates us from pure predators. Dean Morak spoke carefully. Why did humans rank themselves as apex predators on Earth? Could they not simply coexist with other predators? Lauren's expression became somber. No, Dean, we could not. Because everything on Earth that was big enough and hungry enough saw humans as food. Our ancestors were prey for millions of years hunted, eaten, living in constant fear. She paused, then continued with quiet intensity. So humans became better at hunting than anything that hunted them. We learned to track, to plan, to work together, to use tools and fire and strategy. And one by one, we either killed the predators that threatened us or pushed them into smaller territories until they no longer posed a danger. You hunted your hunters to near extinction, Vekthar said. Referencing his earlier lecture, we did what we had to do to survive, Lauren confirmed. And then, when we were finally safe, when no predator on Earth could threaten us anymore, humans created nature preserves and conservation programs to protect the very species we had nearly destroyed. Because we recognized we had gone too far. This statement seemed to surprise everyone in the room. You protected the creatures that hunted you. Morak asked in disbelief. We protected them because we understood they were just trying to survive like we were. Lauren explained. Humans do not hate predators. We understand them. We respect them. And once we were safe enough that they were no longer threats, we chose to help them survive. Dr. Helix made a sound of wonder. That is the balance. The predator. 2 weeks after her interview with the administration, Lauren walked through the station corridors and noticed the atmosphere had shifted again, not the fearful avoidance of before, but a cautious curiosity. Students no longer fled when she approached, but they watched her with new awareness, as if trying to reconcile the quiet young woman with the apex predator designation. She was heading to the main auditorium where Professor Vekthar had called a mandatory assembly for all xenobiology students. And she suspected she knew what it would cover, given the growing interest in human biology and psychology that had swept through the academic community. The auditorium was already filled when she arrived. Hundreds of students from dozens of species taking their seats in the tiered arrangement that allowed everyone to see the central presentation stage. And Lauren noticed that while a space remained around her, it was smaller than before. Less like a quarantine zone, and more like respectful distance. Professor Vekthar stood at the podium arranging his materials, his forearms moving with practiced efficiency. And when he noticed Lauren entering, he gestured for her to take a seat near the front, which she did while aware of every eye tracking her movement. Thank you all for attending, the professor began once everyone had settled. Over the past weeks, our discovery about human apex predator status has created considerable discussion and, I will admit, some fear. Today, I want to address those concerns directly and present a more complete understanding of what apex truly means. The holographic display activated. showing the now familiar image of Earth rotating in space. Let us begin by revisiting what we learned and what we missed. Yes, humans are apex predators. But that classification tells only part of their story. He pulled up a timeline showing human evolution. Humans evolved from prey animals, small, weak creatures that were hunted by everything larger and faster. For millions of years, they survived not by being strong, but by being smart, social, and adaptable. The display showed early human ancestors huddling in caves, using fire to ward off predators, working together to survive in a world that was trying to kill them at every opportunity. The key point here, Vakthar continued, is that humans remember being prey, that fear and vulnerability shaped their entire psychology. They became predators not from strength, but from desperation and determination. Images appeared showing human achievements through history, agriculture, architecture, medicine, art, music, and eventually spaceflight. But they did not stop at mere survival. Humans built civilizations, created beauty, developed ethics and philosophy. They became more than just successful predators. A student raised their hand. Professor, if humans are so advanced and capable, why should we not fear them? Surely that makes them more dangerous, not less? Vekthar's antennae twitched in what Lauren had learned to recognize as approval of a good question. An excellent point. Let me show you something. The display changed to show human medical facilities, rescue operations, and disaster response teams. Humans have the same technology and capability for destruction as for healing. Yet they chose to build hospitals rather than weapons, to rescue rather than conquer. They have weapons, another student pointed out. Very advanced weapons according to the database. Yes, they do, Vekthar acknowledged. Humans created weapons capable of destroying their own planet. And for decades, they had the power to end all life on Earth. Yet they chose not to use them. They negotiated, compromised, and eventually began dismantling those weapons. Dr. Helix joined the professor on stage, her empathic abilities making her a valuable voice on matters of psychology. I have studied human emotional patterns extensively over the past weeks, and I can confirm that humans experience genuine empathy and compassion. These are not learned behaviors or social masks. They are fundamental to human psychology. She pulled up brain scans showing human neural activity. When humans see suffering, their brains activate the same pain centers as if they were suffering themselves. They literally feel others' pain, which makes them highly motivated to prevent and alleviate suffering. But we have seen that humans can disconnect this empathy. A student objected. They admitted they can turn it off when protecting their pack. They can reduce it temporarily when necessary, Dr. Helix corrected. But it causes them psychological distress to do so. Humans who have had to harm others, even in legitimate self-defense, often suffer lasting emotional trauma from the experience. Lauren listened quietly, finding it strange to hear herself and her species analyzed like a scientific specimen, but also appreciating the care and accuracy with which these alien academics were trying to understand humanity. Professor Vekthar gestured for Lauren and Brandon to join them on stage, and both humans exchanged glances before standing and walking to the front of the auditorium, aware of hundreds of eyes following their movement. Miss Mitchell? Mr. Cole, the professor said formally, would you be willing to help the student body understand human nature by answering some questions directly? Of course, Lauren said, while Brandon nodded agreement. The first question came immediately from Zix, the reptilian student who had started this entire situation. Do you see us as prey? When you look at us, do your predator instincts categorize us potential food? Brandon looked horrified by the question, but Lauren answered calmly. No, we see you as people, classmates, potential friends. Humans have complex enough social cognition to override simple predator-prey categorization, but you do assess as threats, another student said. not quite making it a question. We assess everyone as potential threats because our brains evolved to do that automatically. Lauren confirmed. But we also assess you for compatibility as friends, for shared interests, for trustworthiness as study partners. The threat assessment is just one small part of how we perceive others. Dr. Hellick stepped in. Think of it like how some species automatically assess food sources when entering a new environment. It does not mean they are constantly hungry or planning to eat everything they see. It is simply automatic background processing. A brave student asked, "What would make you dangerous?" Under what circumstances would humans actually use their apex predator capabilities? Brandon answered this time, his voice firm. If someone threatened our families, our friends, our pack, that is when humans become dangerous, not from anger or aggression, but from protective instinct. We are more dangerous when defending others than when defending ourselves, Lauren added. A human will endure personal suffering, but threaten their loved ones, and you will see why we survived when bigger. Stronger predators did not. Professor Vecthar pulled up more images. This protective instinct extends beyond their own species. Humans formed bonds with other Earth creatures and protected them. They domesticated wolves and made them family members. They rescued injured animals and nursed them to health. They created laws protecting species they do not even particularly like. The display showed humans with various Earth animals, dogs, cats, horses, even wild animals being treated for injuries and released back to nature. This is the aspect of human apex status that we initially missed. Vecthar continued. Yes, humans can be extremely dangerous, but they chose to channel that capability into protection rather than predation. A student asked quietly, "Can you really choose? Can predator instincts truly be controlled?" Lauren stepped forward. Every human makes that choice every single day. We have the capability to harm, but we choose not to. We have the strength to dominate, but we choose to cooperate. That choice is what defines us more than our capabilities ever could. On Earth, Brandon added, humans created something called the Geneva Conventions, rules for how to conduct warfare ethically. Even in conflict, even when fighting for survival, humans chose to limit how they used violence. They made rules for war? A student asked in disbelief, because humans understand that how you fight matters as much as whether you win. Lauren explained, "We learned through bitter experience that unlimited violence destroys everyone. So we chose to restrain ourselves, even in the worst circumstances." Dr. Helix addressed the audience. This is what makes humans unique among apex predators we have studied. They are consciously aware of their predator, nature, and actively work to control it. They are not simply dangerous. They are dangerous and responsible about that danger. The questions continued for over an hour. Students gradually becoming more comfortable, asking about human capabilities, psychology, and culture. And Lauren noticed the fear in the room slowly transforming into fascination finally. Zick stood and addressed Lauren directly. "I owe you an apology. When I asked to see Earth's apex predator list, I was curious and a little dismissive. I did not expect to be frightened. And I certainly did not expect to have my entire understanding of predator-prey dynamics challenged." He paused, gathering courage, then continued. "But I have learned something important. Being apex is not about being the most dangerous. It is about being the most capable and choosing what to do with that capability. Humans chose to come to the stars seeking friends, not prey. And I would like to accept that offer of friendship." Lauren smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. "I would like that too, Zix." "Thank you." Other students began standing, some offering similar apologies, others asking if they could study together. And gradually the barrier of fear,